Nobody owns life, but anyone who picks up a frying pan owns death. William S. Burroughs. Belief in the spirit world can be powerful, whether it's the power of faith, the power of evil, or the power of suggestion. It's a matter of endless discussion and debate. But one night in East Flatbush, Brooklyn, that belief took a sudden, frightening turn between two friends who had happily known each other for years. A turn that proved fatal for one of them. On February 27, 2017, at 10 p.m., 16-year-old Brianna Jean Baptiste ran up the stairs to the front door of her grandparents' house in East Flatbush, Brooklyn. She was in a hurry because her mother was waiting outside in the car. She'd asked Brianna to quickly run in and pick up a gift her grandmother had for her. Brianna expected her grandmother, lovingly called Mama Edna by the neighborhood, to be in the living room. A lamp was on, but Edna wasn't in the room. Brianna thought that was strange, knowing her grandmother always turned her lights off to save money. She yelled up the stairs and got no answer. Concerned, she finally went up to Edna's room. Brianna opened the door and found her grandmother lying on the floor. It didn't register at first. She thought Mama Edna might have fallen or fainted. Then she saw the blood. She turned around immediately and ran from the house to get her mother. Brianna's mother, Marjorie, rushed up the stairs to where her mother was lying and told Brianna to call 911. She touched her mother's neck and thought she felt a faint pulse. Then she went to her father Frederick's bedroom and banged on the door to see if he was okay. Not only was Frederick okay, he had his television on loudly and hadn't even realized his daughter and granddaughter were in the house. When his daughter rushed to him, he was startled at all the commotion. Marjorie and her father desperately performed CPR on Mama Edna until EMTs arrived and asked them to stop. There was nothing anyone could do. Mama Edna was dead. More first responders arrived shortly and noticed cables on the floor, as well as a bloody hammer with its head broken off. They found what looked like ligature marks on Edna's neck and asked everyone to wait outside as they called in homicide detectives. The well-loved matriarch of East Flatbush, Brooklyn, was not only dead, she'd been murdered, and this was a crime scene. 78-year-old Edna moved to New York from Haiti in 1968. There, she built a life for herself and her family, raising 4 children along with her husband, Frederick, while working as a seamstress. Edna was the life of Troy Avenue. She loved to dance and make people laugh, and she was a sought-after cook for her Haitian dishes. She was proud of her Haitian heritage and culture, which included the religious practice of voodoo. Her loved ones described her as the glue that held her family together. She was known as a spiritual healer in the community. It seemed everyone in the community loved her, but obviously someone didn't. Someone had wanted her dead. While the family waited outside with the crowd of neighbors that were gathering, the police did their initial crime scene walkthrough. Detectives checked all the windows and doors for forced entry, but found nothing. They inspected the bedroom where Mama Edna was still lying in a pool of blood. They took note of her head wounds, the bloody hammer, the cables on the floor, and her neck bruising. She looked like she had been beaten, and several of her fingernails were broken off. She had struggled before her attacker murdered her. Detectives questioned each family member to see if they could come up with anyone who would want to harm Edna. Each family member said she was loved by the whole community. She had lived here for almost 50 years and had no enemies. Everyone loved Mama Edna, or at least almost everyone. Police turned their focus to 76-year-old Frederick Pierre Jacques, Mama Edna's husband. Questioning the spouse is standard procedure in a homicide case, and they were keen to find out how Edna's murderer had managed to kill her with Frederick in the next room. How long had they been estranged and in separate bedrooms? Did they fight? Why didn't he hear Edna yelling for help? Neighbors who were interviewed about Edna and Frederick's relationship claimed Frederick put a padlock on his door to keep Edna out. They said that Edna loved to cook, but her husband refused to eat her cooking, choosing to order takeout instead. Frederick also had a problem with Edna's work as a spiritual healer in the community. When she did her Haitian dancing, Frederick would mock her and call her a crazy woman and a disgraced human. It was certain that their relationship was messy, but was it messy enough for him to wield the hammer and strangle his estranged wife? When directly questioned by investigators at the scene, Frederick said he must have been in his room when Edna was murdered. He claimed he heard a noise sometime between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m., but he didn't come out of his bedroom. Detectives searched his room and found an old book on a side table, which was open to a page with a startling title, How to Get Rid of a Witch. The page explained the process of eliminating a witch from one's life. It said to write the witch's name on several pieces of paper and burn the papers. Next to the book was a ceramic dish containing several spent matches and burned pieces of paper. Detectives were shocked to find Edna's name written on the papers. Detectives identified Frederick as a person of interest and took him to the police station to question him further. The next lead for investigators came when they discovered the Pierre Jacques home had an illegal gambling room operating out of the basement. It was fully furnished with fax machines, cash registers, cell phones, and calculators. Frederick claimed that Edna rented out the basement as a way to make extra income, and that he had nothing to do with it or with the gambling operation. Police located the woman who managed the gambling room and found out no games were scheduled on the night of Edna's death. Authorities initially thought Edna had been beaten to death, but the autopsy revealed that, while she was either struck with the hammer or hit her head on the floor, the cause of death was not blunt force trauma, but strangulation. Even with the questionable evidence in his bedroom, Frederick was cleared as a person of interest after it was found that he had no fingerprints on the bloody hammer. They believed that Frederick was upset or embarrassed that his wife was a spiritual healer and just wanted to stop her from doing spells. Frederick's family supported him, stating that he felt bad for not being able to stop Edna's murder. He claimed that even though they weren't living as a married couple, she was still the mother of his children, and he would never physically harm her. 43-year-old Tamisha Harper was a close friend of Edna's. She was a daily fixture in the Pierre Jacques household and had been for years, according to the family. She had been crying and hugging people in the crowd shortly after Edna's body was found, but she left before homicide detectives arrived and was never questioned. One of Edna's daughters had seen Tamisha and her boyfriend in a car outside the house a few hours after the murder. She knocked on the car window to ask Tamisha if she had any information, but the two of them sped off in the car. At the time, Edna's daughter thought Tamisha was in shock after losing such a close friend. One of Edna's granddaughters confirmed that Tamisha had been with Edna the day she was murdered, and that the granddaughter had said hello to her when she stopped by the house to pick something up. The day of the murder, Edna's daughter went to Tamisha's house and knocked on the door, but she got no response. 2 days had passed since Edna's death, and investigators wanted to interview Tamisha. They thought it was odd that such a good friend of Edna's would disappear after she died. She still wasn't at home and wouldn't return their phone calls. Detectives tried her workplace and found out she had missed 2 days of work. Coworkers said Tamisha never missed work. Police began to suspect she saw something related to the murder, or that she was being threatened and was in hiding. Tamisha's boyfriend, like Tamisha, was not at his address, not answering his phone, and hadn't been seen for 2 days. Police finally tracked her down at her mother's home in New Jersey. When her mother opened the door to the detectives, she was visibly upset and said her daughter was in the living room. Tamisha was curled up in a fetal position on the sofa and looked as if she hadn't slept for days. Her hair was wild and unbrushed, and she couldn't look at the detectives. When they identified themselves and explained why they were there, she sat up and began rocking back and forth. Tamisha cooperated when she was brought in for questioning. She told them exactly what had happened that night. As she explained it to the detectives, 2 weeks before the murder, a neighborhood woman had become worried that her boyfriend was interested in Tamisha. Like Edna, this jealous woman supposedly practiced voodoo. Tamisha believed that this neighborhood woman had cursed her, and she turned to Edna for help removing the hex. Edna agreed to do so, but things didn't go as planned. She asked Tamisha to return later on the evening of February 27th, and she would do the healing. When Tamisha returned, she couldn't stop coughing. Edna told her that she had been touched. According to Tamisha, this meant that she had spirits in her as a result of the curse. Tamisha said that Edna looked at her and said, "You're here to harm me." Tamisha replied that, of course, she wasn't. She was confused. When Edna left the living room to go upstairs, Tamisha followed her. Once they were in Edna's bedroom, Edna turned to her once again and said, "You're here to kill me." According to Tamisha, the spirits took over, making her strangle Edna. Edna yelled for Frederick, and Tamisha was worried Frederick would come into the room, but he never did. Tamisha denied hitting Edna with the hammer, but did say she grabbed it. She pushed Edna to the ground and strangled her with the cables to make her be quiet. After Edna stopped screaming, Tamisha got up, walked across the street to her house, showered, and called her boyfriend. She told him she had killed Edna. He suggested that she go to her mother's house and offered to drive her. Tamisha was arrested for murder on March 2nd, 2017, and agreed to plead guilty to first-degree manslaughter to spare the family a painful, lengthy trial. Brooklyn District Attorney Eric Gonzalez said, "This defendant strangled to death a neighbor she once considered a close friend. My sincerest condolences to the family of this victim, a 78-year-old woman who suffered such a violent and sudden death at the hands of someone she trusted." Tamisha Harper was sentenced to 17 years in prison and is currently in the Bedford Hills Correctional Facility. She could be conditionally released in 2031. To this day, family and friends still don't understand the motive for the senseless and violent murder of Momma Edna.